The wind was a living thing that night, clawing at Clara Whitmore's threadbare coat as if it wanted to strip the last warmth from her bones. She'd been walking for hours, 17 miles from the mining camp where her father had died 3 weeks earlier, leaving her nothing but debts and a name that meant less than dirt in Montana territory. Her boots, already worn through at the soles, left bloody prints in the snow. The Hartwell estate rose before her like a palace carved from winter itself. Golden light poured from every window, warm and impossible. Music drifted across the frozen lawn, violins and laughter, the sound of people who'd never known what it meant to be cold. Clara stopped at the servants' entrance, her hand trembling as she knocked. The door opened. A woman in a starched uniform looked her up and down with the kind of contempt that didn't need words. "I'm here about the seamstress position," Clara said, hating how small her voice sounded. The posting in town said, "That position was filled 2 days ago." The housekeeper's eyes were ice. "You're wasting my time. Please." Clara's pride crumbled. "I can sew anything. I'm fast. I'm careful. I just need—" "What you need is to leave before I call someone to remove you." The door slammed. Clara stood there, snow gathering in her hair, staring at the ornate wood that had just shut her out. Behind it, she could hear music swelling, glasses chiming, the bubble of conversation that meant nothing and everything. She'd walked 17 miles. Her feet were bleeding. The cold was so deep now it had stopped hurting. She should turn back. Walk 17 miles home to the shack that wasn't even hers anymore, crawl under the thin blanket, and wait for winter to finish what it had started. But something in her, something stubborn and burning and absolutely furious, wouldn't let her move. The main entrance was 50 feet away, framed by columns and torchlight. Through the windows, she could see women in silk gowns gliding past like ghosts made of money, men in tailored suits, servants carrying trays of champagne that probably cost more than her father had earned in a year. Clara Whitmore, who had nothing, walked toward that door. Her hand, red from cold, scarred from needle pricks, reached for the brass handle. She pulled it open. The warmth hit her first, a wave so intense it made her dizzy. Then the light, then the smell, perfume and wood smoke and roasted meat and wine. The entrance hall was vast, chandelier bright, filled with people who turned as one to stare at the girl in the ragged coat tracking snow across marble floors. The music stopped. "My God," someone whispered. "Did a vagrant just walk in?" Clara's face burned, but she forced herself to stand straight. A man in a butler's uniform was already moving toward her, his expression thunderous. "Miss, you need to leave immediately. I'm looking for work." Her voice cracked, but she pushed the words out anyway. "I can sew. I can clean. I'll do anything." A woman in emerald silk laughed, high and cruel. "How delightfully desperate. Did you hear that, Margot? She'll do anything." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara felt it like slaps. "I think someone left the servants' door unlocked," a man drawled. "We're letting in strays now." The butler grabbed Clara's arm. "You're leaving. Now." "Wait." A new voice cut through the mockery. Young, male, slurred with expensive whiskey. "Let me see her." The crowd parted. A man in his 30s stepped forward, blond and handsome in the way of people who'd never had to work for anything. His cravat was loose, his eyes glazed. Theodore Hartwell, Jr., Clara realized with sinking dread. The sun, the air, the reason this party existed. He circled her slowly, and she felt stripped naked under his gaze. "You walked here," he said, "through the storm." "Yes." "For work." "Yes." He smiled. It was the cruelest thing she'd seen all night. "How much do you need? To survive? Give me a number." Clara's throat closed. Around them, the crowd had gone quiet with anticipation. $5, she whispered. $5 would— Theodore pulled out his wallet. He extracted a bill, crisp, new, worth more than $5. He held it up for everyone to see. Then he dropped it on the floor at Clara's feet. "There," he said. "Now pick it up." The room held its breath. Clara stared at the money on the marble. She knew what this was. A test, a game. Pick it up and become the entertainment. The desperate girl who'd debase herself for scraps. Refuse and walk back into the storm with nothing. Her knees started to bend. "That's it," Theodore purred. "Down you go, little. She won't be picking that up." The new voice was different, lower, colder. It cut through the room like a blade, and suddenly the air itself felt dangerous. A man stepped out of the shadows near the fireplace. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face was all hard angles and controlled violence, a scar cutting white through his left eyebrow. He moved like a predator, each step deliberate. Lucas Blackstone. Clara had heard the name whispered in town. The rancher who'd built an empire from nothing. The man who'd killed 3 cattle thieves with his bare hands. The wolf in gentleman's clothing who owned half the territory and wanted the rest. He crossed the room in 4 strides and planted himself between Clara and Theodore. "Blackstone," Theodore said, his smile faltering, "this doesn't concern you." "It does now." Lucas's voice was quiet, but it carried. "Because she's my wife." The room exploded. Clara's vision swam. She must have heard wrong. The cold had finally driven her mad, and now she was hallucinating in a stranger's mansion while her body froze to death outside. But Lucas was turning to her, his dark eyes boring into hers with an intensity that burned. "Isn't that right, darling?" he said softly. She stared at him, at this man she'd never met, who just claimed her as his own in front of Montana's elite. His eyes held a message she didn't understand, but beneath it was something sharp and clear. Play along or drown. Her voice failed. "She's confused," Lucas said smoothly, turning back to the crowd. "She came looking for me, got lost in this monstrosity you call a house." He glanced at Theodore with contempt. "And found you instead, treating her like a dog begging for scraps." "This is insane." A woman pushed forward, beautiful, cold, wearing diamonds that caught the light like shards of ice. Victoria Hartwell, Clara realized. Theodore's sister. "Lucas, you're engaged to Margaret Ashford. The wedding is in 3 months. You can't possibly—" "The engagement is over." Lucas didn't even look at her. "Has been for weeks. I just hadn't made it public yet." "You lying son of a—" Theodore lunged forward, but 2 men grabbed his arms. "You're trying to humiliate me in my own house." "You humiliated yourself." Lucas's tone was ice. "Watching you play with that girl like she was a toy made me sick, so I'm taking her home. My wife deserves better than this circus." He held out his hand to Clara. She looked at it, strong, scarred, steady, and then at his face. This was madness. This was a lie so massive it would collapse the moment anyone questioned it. But his eyes held hers, and in them she saw something unexpected. Fury on her behalf. This stranger, this dangerous man, was genuinely angry at how she'd been treated. Clara took his hand. His fingers closed around hers. Warm, solid, real. He pulled her gently to his side, and she felt the room's temperature drop 20 degrees. "This is fraud," Theodore spat. "You can't just claim some vagrant as your wife." "Careful." Lucas's voice went lethal. "You're talking about Mrs. Blackstone now, and I don't tolerate disrespect to my family." "Where's the proof?" Victoria demanded. "Marriage certificate? Witnesses? Anything?" "Private ceremony? Small? Recent?" Lucas shrugged. "I prefer my personal business to remain personal, unlike some people who turn their engagements into territorial spectacles." "Margaret Ashford will destroy you for this," someone called out. "Her father controls half the banks in the territory." "Then I'll use the other half." Lucas's smile was all teeth. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to take my wife home. She's had a long walk." He guided Clara toward the door. The crowd parted like water around a stone, shock and fury radiating from every face. Clara's legs were shaking so hard she could barely walk, but Lucas's hand on her back kept her moving. They were almost to the entrance when Theodore's voice rang out. "I'll prove you're lying, Blackstone. I'll investigate every record, every witness. When I expose this fraud, you'll lose everything. Your land contracts, your political appointments, your reputation. You just destroyed yourself to save a whore you don't even know." Lucas stopped, turned, walked back to Theodore with the patient pace of a man about to commit murder. He stopped inches from Theodore's face. "Let me be very clear," he said quietly. "You can investigate whatever you want. But if you ever Speak about my wife that way again, I will end you. Not legally, not financially, personally. Do you understand? Theodore had gone pale. Lucas turned and walked back to Clara. He took off his coat, heavy, warm, lined with fur, and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her, still warm from his body. Let's go home, he said gently. Clara nodded, mute with shock. They walked out into the storm together, leaving chaos blooming behind them. Lucas's carriage was waiting. Black lacquered wood, pulled by horses that probably cost more than most houses. A driver in a heavy coat jumped down to open the door, his face carefully neutral. Lucas helped Clara inside, then climbed in after her. The door shut, cutting off the wind. The interior was warm, heated by brass foot warmers. Leather seats soft as butter. A fur blanket folded in the corner. The carriage lurched into motion. Clara sat frozen, Lucas's coat still wrapped around her, staring at the man who'd just upended both their lives. He was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. I'm sorry, he said finally. That was the only way I could think of to get you out of there intact. Clara found her voice. You told them I was your wife. I did. We've never met. We hadn't. You were engaged to someone else. I was. He leaned back, rubbing his temple. A political arrangement. Margaret Ashford's father wanted access to my land contracts. I wanted his banking connections. Neither of us was in love. But now it's over. Along with the contracts, the political appointments, and probably half my business relationships. He smiled without humor. Theodore wasn't exaggerating. This will cost me significantly. Clara's hands were shaking. Why? Why would you do that for a stranger? Lucas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the storm. My mother was a seamstress, he said finally. She walked miles through weather like this looking for work after my father died. Came home with bloody feet and empty hands more often than not. His jaw tightened. Watching that bastard make you beg, it brought back memories I'd rather forget. I'm sorry about your mother. Don't be. She survived. Built something from nothing, taught me to do the same. He turned to look at her. But she shouldn't have had to suffer for it. And neither should you. Clara's throat burned. I don't understand. You saved me, but now they'll investigate. They'll discover we never got married. Then what? Then we'll have to make sure they don't discover that. Her heart stopped. What? Lucas leaned forward, his expression serious. I'm going to make you an offer, Miss Whitmore. Clara Whitmore. Clara. He nodded. Here's the situation. I just publicly claimed you as my wife. Theodore Hartwell is rich, petty, and humiliated. He'll spend every resource he has trying to prove we're lying. If he succeeds, we both go down. Me for fraud, you as my accomplice. But we are lying. Only if we keep lying. Lucas's eyes gleamed. But if we actually get married, legally, properly, then we're not lying anymore. We're just a couple with an unconventional beginning. Clara's mouth fell open. You want to marry me? For real? I want to marry you for 1 year, he corrected. A business arrangement. You become Mrs. Lucas Blackstone. Live in my house. Attend social functions. Help me weather the storm I just created. In exchange, I pay you a salary, enough to build a real life afterward. And when the year is up, we divorce quietly, and you walk away with enough money to start fresh anywhere you want. This is insane. Probably. He smiled grimly. But it's also the only play we have left. I already burned the bridge. Might as well cross it. Clara's mind was spinning. What about the woman you were engaged to? Margaret? Margaret will survive. She'll probably thank me eventually. Neither of us wanted that marriage. He paused. The person you should worry about is yourself. Because this won't be easy. Society will tear you apart. They'll call you a fraud, a gold digger, worse. Every word you say, every dress you wear, every move you make will be examined for proof that you don't belong. Can you handle that? Clara thought about the mansion, Theodore's cruel smile, the money on the floor, the 17-mile walk through the storm. I've handled worse, she said quietly. Lucas studied her for a long moment, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. I believe you have. He held out his hand. So, do we have a deal? Clara stared at his hand, at this strange, dangerous man who'd just offered her salvation wrapped in scandal. Every instinct screamed that this was madness, a bargain with consequences she couldn't imagine. But what was the alternative? Walk back into the storm? Return to poverty and 17-mile walks and men like Theodore? She'd already lost everything. What was left to risk? Clara Whitmore took Lucas Blackstone's hand for the second time that night. 1 year, she said. 1 year, he agreed. The carriage rolled through the storm, carrying them toward a future neither could predict, built on a lie that had just become the most dangerous truth of their lives. The Blackstone Ranch materialized out of the storm like something from a dream or a nightmare. Claire couldn't decide which. The main house was massive, 3 stories of dark timber and stone, windows glowing gold against the white rage of snow. Outbuildings scattered across the landscape, barns, stables, bunkhouses for ranch hands. Even in the dark, she could sense the sheer scale of it. This was power. This was what Lucas Blackstone had built from nothing. The carriage stopped. The driver opened the door and Lucas stepped down first, then helped Clara out. She stumbled slightly. Her feet were numb, her whole body shaking from exhaustion and shock. Lucas caught her elbow. "Steady." "I'm fine." "You're hypothermic and running on fumes." He guided her toward the house. "We'll get you warm, fed, and then we'll talk details." The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood silhouetted in the light, tall, gray-haired, her face carved from the same stone as the mountains. She took one look at Clara and her eyes widened fractionally. "Lucas? What happened?" "Change of plans, Sarah." Lucas steered Clara inside. "This is Clara Whitmore, my wife. She'll be living here from now on." Sarah's face went carefully blank. "Your wife?" "Long story. Very cold night. I'll explain after we've taken care of her." He turned to Clara. "Sarah runs this house. Anything you need, ask her. She's terrifying but fair." "Flattery won't save you from the conversation we're about to have," Sarah said dryly. But her eyes on Clara had softened. "Come on, dear. Let's get you out of those wet clothes before you freeze to death." Clara let herself be led upstairs, too exhausted to protest, too overwhelmed to process. Sarah brought her to a bedroom that was bigger than the entire shack Clara had grown up in. A fire was already burning in the fireplace. The bed looked like something royalty would sleep in. "There's a bathroom through that door," Sarah said, pointing. "Hot water, clean towels. I'll bring up some clothes and food. You take as long as you need." "Thank you," Clara whispered. Sarah paused at the door. "I don't know what's happening here, but Lucas is a good man, even when he's being an idiot. If he brought you home, he has a reason." Her smile was slight. "Try not to die of shock before morning. I'd hate to waste the effort." Then she was gone. Clara stood alone in the enormous room, Lucas's coat still wrapped around her shoulders, and finally let herself feel it. The terror, the relief, the absolute unreality of the last 2 hours. She'd walked 17 miles seeking work. She'd been humiliated by the rich. She'd been claimed by a stranger. And now she was standing in a palace, about to become the legal wife of one of the most powerful men in Montana Territory. Clara started laughing, wild, slightly hysterical laughter that turned into tears halfway through. She sank onto the bed, buried her face in her hands, and let herself break apart, just for a moment. Just until the hot bath and food arrived. Then she'd pull herself together because this was only the beginning. The lie had been told. Now came the hard part, making everyone believe it. 2 hours later, Clara sat across from Lucas in his study, wrapped in a borrowed robe, her hair still damp from the bath. Food sat between them. Bread, cheese, roasted chicken, wine. She'd eaten like she was starving, because she was. Lucas had been giving her space, handling paperwork while she recovered. Now he set down his pen and looked at her directly. "Better?" "Yes, thank you." Clara set down her wine glass. "So, details." He nodded. "We'll get married tomorrow. I have a judge who owes me a favor. He'll do it quietly, backdate the license a few weeks to match the story. That covers the legal requirement. Won't people question why we kept it secret? We'll say we wanted privacy. That I didn't want the spectacle of a society wedding after watching my mother struggle. He leaned back. It's close enough to true that I can sell it. And your engagement to Margaret Ashford? I'll send her a letter tonight, apologize, explain. He grimaced. She'll be furious, but she'll understand eventually. Her father, on the other hand, will try to destroy me financially. Can he? He can try. Lucas's smile was sharp. I've survived worse. Clara studied him, this man who'd upended his life for a stranger. Why did you really do it? The truth? Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Because I was engaged to a woman I didn't love for reasons that had nothing to do with marriage, he said finally. And watching Theodore treat you like garbage, it crystallized something. I was about to chain myself to a life of political maneuvering and empty appearances. At least this, he gestured between them, is honest in its dishonesty. A transaction, clean. Nothing about this is clean. Fair point. He poured more wine. But it's cleaner than what I was walking into. Clara absorbed that. And after the year, you'll just let me walk away? With enough money to start fresh, yes. That's the deal. Why would you trust me not to take the money and expose the whole thing? Because if you do, you'll be labeled a fraud and a gold digger for the rest of your life. The scandal would follow you anywhere. His eyes met hers. This only works if we both commit. Fully. For 1 year. Clara's hands were shaking again, but not from cold this time. 1 year, she repeated. Playing the role of your wife, convincing everyone we're in love. Or at least convincingly married. Love isn't required. He paused. But respect is. I won't touch you, Clara. This is a business arrangement. Separate bedrooms, clear boundaries. You have my word. Something in her chest loosened slightly. Okay. Okay? You agree? Or okay, you need time to think. Clara looked around the study, at the books lining the walls, the fire crackling in the hearth, the windows showing nothing but storm and darkness beyond. She thought about the alternative, walking back out into that storm, returning to nothing, watching winter finish what poverty had started. I agree, she said quietly. Lucas nodded slowly. Then we have a lot of work to do. Starting tomorrow, you'll need to learn everything about being Mrs. Lucas Blackstone. How to dress, how to speak, which fork to use at dinner parties. Sarah will help with most of it. I'm not an idiot, Clara said, stung. I can learn. I know you can. That's why I'm betting my reputation on it. His smile was slight. But the people we're fooling, they'll be looking for any crack in the facade. We can't give them one. Clara lifted her chin. Then I won't. Good. Lucas stood, offering his hand. Welcome to the Blackstone Ranch, Mrs. Blackstone. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow, your real education begins. Clara took his hand for the third time that night and let him help her to her feet. As she walked back to her room, exhaustion pulling at every bone, one thought circled through her mind. She'd survived the storm. Now came the real test, surviving what they'd just set in motion. Behind her, she heard Lucas's study door close softly. Ahead, the enormous house stretched out like a labyrinth, and somewhere beyond these walls, Theodore Hartwell was already plotting their destruction. Clara Whitmore, soon to be Clara Blackstone, climbed the stairs to her borrowed bedroom and tried not to think about how badly this could end. The lie had been born. Now they had to keep it alive. Dawn broke cold and merciless over the Blackstone Ranch, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of blood and gold. Clara woke to find Sarah standing beside her bed with a tray of coffee and toast, her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackstone," Sarah said, and the name landed like a stone in Clara's chest. "Lucas wants you downstairs in an hour. The judge arrives at 10. Clara sat up, her body aching from yesterday's 17-mile walk. Already? Time waits for no one, especially when you're trying to outrun a scandal. Sarah set down the tray. Eat. Then we'll find you something appropriate to wear for a wedding. The word felt surreal. Wedding. Clara had imagined this day once, years ago. A simple ceremony, a man who loved her, a future built on something real. Not this. Not a legal transaction designed to salvage a lie. She forced down the toast, drank the bitter coffee, and let Sarah lead her to a dressing room that was larger than any bedroom Clara had ever slept in. Rows of gowns hung like sleeping ghosts, silks and velvets in every color imaginable. These were Lucas's mother's, Sarah said quietly, running her hand along the fabrics. He kept them. Never could bear to get rid of them, though he'd never admit it. Clara touched a dress of deep emerald green, the fabric so soft it felt like water. She must have been beautiful. She was remarkable. Sarah pulled out a simpler gown, cream-colored, elegant, but understated. This will work. Nothing too elaborate. We're selling a private ceremony, remember? Clara stripped to her chemise and let Sarah help her into the dress. It fit almost perfectly, just a touch long in the hem. Sarah pinned it quickly, her fingers nimble and sure. You've done this before, Clara observed. I dressed Lucas's mother for 10 years before she passed. Sarah's voice softened. She taught me everything. How to run a household. How to survive in a world that wanted to crush people like us. She met Clara's eyes in the mirror. She'd have liked you, I think. She didn't even know me. No, but she knew what it was like to walk through a storm looking for work. Sarah's smile was sad. Lucas doesn't talk about it much, but his mother nearly died doing what you did yesterday. That's why he lost his mind at that party. You reminded him of her. Clara's throat tightened. She thought about Lucas's fury, the way he'd stepped between her and Theodore like a man ready to commit murder. He destroyed his engagement for me, she whispered. A stranger. He destroyed an engagement that was already dead. Sarah adjusted the dress's neckline. Margaret Ashford is a lovely woman, but she and Lucas had all the passion of a business contract, which, to be fair, is exactly what it was. She stepped back, studying her work. This, though? This is something else entirely. This is a lie. Maybe, but it's an interesting lie. Sarah handed Clara a pair of soft leather boots. Now, come on. We have 30 minutes to make you look like you belong here. Clara descended the stairs 20 minutes later, her hair pinned in a simple twist, the cream dress flowing around her like a second skin. Lucas was waiting in the foyer, dressed in a dark suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a painting, all sharp lines and controlled power. He looked up as she approached, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or appreciation. You look perfect, he said simply. Sarah did all the work. Sarah has good taste. He offered his arm. The judge is in my study. This won't take long. Clara took his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. They walked together down the hall, past oil paintings of Montana landscapes and mounted elk heads that watched them with glass eyes. The study door was open. Inside, a rotund man with white mutton chops stood warming himself by the fire. He turned as they entered, his expression carefully neutral. Lucas, and this must be the bride. Judge Morrison, this is Clara Whitmore. Lucas's hand settled at the small of Clara's back, warm, steady, possessive. Clara, Judge Morrison has been a friend to my family for years. Charmed. The judge's eyes were sharp despite his jovial appearance. He looked Clara up and down, assessing. I understand congratulations are in order, though I must say, this is all rather sudden. We preferred privacy to spectacle, Lucas said smoothly. I hope that's not a problem. Not at all, not at all. But the judge's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Though I imagine there will be questions. The Ashford family, for instance, will be informed appropriately. Lucas's tone went cold. This is a legal matter, Joseph, not a social one. Can you perform the ceremony or not? The judge's expression shuddered. Of course. I've brought the license, already dated, as you requested. He pulled a document from his case. Shall we begin? Sarah appeared in the doorway, and Lucas nodded at her. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The four of them stood in the study, Clara, Lucas, the judge, and Sarah as witness, about to make permanent a lie that had existed for less than 12 hours. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Do you, Lucas Blackstone, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Lucas turned to face Clara fully. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw the question in them. Last chance to run. I do, he said. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear. This was insane. This was a mistake that would haunt her forever. This was... She thought about Theodore's smile. The money on the floor, the 17-mile walk, the cold that had nearly killed her. "I do," she said clearly. "Then by the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Morrison's smile was thin. "You may kiss the bride, though I suspect this is hardly a romantic occasion." Lucas leaned in, giving Clara time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't move. His lips brushed hers, soft, brief, utterly chaste. It was over in a heartbeat, but Clara felt it like electricity down her spine. "Congratulations," the judge said dryly. "May your union be whatever it is you're hoping for." Lucas signed the marriage certificate with quick, decisive strokes. Clara signed below him, her hand shaking slightly. Sarah added her signature as witness. Judge Morrison notarized everything with official stamps and seals. "There." He handed the document to Lucas. "You're legally married. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have several other appointments that won't cause me political nightmares." "Thank you, Joseph." Lucas walked him to the door. "I appreciate your discretion." "My discretion will cost you when election season comes around." The judge paused at the threshold. "Lucas, I've known you since you were a boy. I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Lucas said quietly. The judge left. Sarah made a discreet exit, and then it was just Clara and Lucas standing in the study, legally bound to each other by documents that still smelled of fresh ink. Clara stared at the marriage certificate in Lucas's hands. "It's real now." "Yes. We're actually married." "We are." He set the document on his desk. "Which means we need to move quickly. Theodore Hartwell will have investigators looking into us within days. We need to be ready." Clara's stomach twisted. "How do we do that?" "By building a believable history." Lucas pulled out a chair for her. "Sit. We're going to create our story, where we met, how long we've known each other, why we married in secret. Every detail needs to be consistent." For the next 3 hours they worked. Lucas questioned her about her past, her father's work in the mines, her childhood, her education. She told him everything, holding nothing back. In return, he shared pieces of his own history. His mother's death, building the ranch from nothing, the years of fighting for respect in a world that saw him as common trash. "We'll say we met 6 months ago," Lucas decided, "at a church social in Helena. You were visiting a friend, I was there on business." "Did we fall in love immediately?" "No, too fairy tale. We'll say it was gradual, correspondence at first, letters, then visits when I could get away." His eyes met hers. "We kept it quiet because I was still negotiating with the Ashfords. Didn't want complications." Clara nodded, filing away each detail. "And the marriage? Why now?" "Because I realized the Ashford engagement was a mistake. Because I didn't want to wait any longer." Lucas's voice softened. "Because you're worth more than being my secret." "That's a good line." "It needs to be. We'll be repeating it a lot." He stood, pacing to the window. "The hardest part won't be the investigators. It'll be society. They'll tear you apart, Clara. Question everything about you, your background, your motives, your right to exist in their world." "I've faced worse." "Have you?" He turned to look at her. "Have you ever been in a room full of people who hate you on sight? Who'll smile to your face and destroy you behind your back? Who'll examine every word you say for evidence that you don't belong?" Clara thought about last night. The emerald dress, the laughter, the money on the floor. "Yes," she said quietly. "I have." Lucas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you might survive this after all." The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah drilled Clara on etiquette, which fork for salad, how to address a senator, the proper way to enter a room. It was exhausting and humiliating in equal measure. "Stop slouching," Sarah said for the 10th time. "You're Mrs. Lucas Blackstone now. You walk like you own the ground beneath your feet." "I don't own anything." "Then pretend. That's what half of society does anyway." Sarah demonstrated, her spine straight as a rifle, her chin high. "Like this. Now you try." Clara tried, failed, tried again. By the 4th attempt, Sarah's nod was grudging approval. "Better. You're a quick study, at least. She handed Clara a book. Balance this on your head while you walk. I want perfect posture by tomorrow. This is ridiculous. This is survival. Sarah's expression was fierce. Those people will look for any excuse to tear you down. Don't give them ammunition. So Clara walked with a book on her head. She practiced holding teacups without her hands shaking. She memorized the names of Montana's elite, who was married to whom, which families had money, which had power, where the alliances lay. By evening, her head was pounding, and her feet ached from walking in heels. Lucas found her in the library, surrounded by books about etiquette and society, looking utterly defeated. "How's the training going?" he asked. "I feel like I'm learning to be a different person." "You are." He sat across from her. "The question is whether you can do it fast enough." Clara set down the book she'd been reading. "Tell me about the people we'll be facing, not just their names. Who are they, really?" Lucas leaned back, considering. "Theodore Hartwell is a bully and a coward. He'll come at us through investigators and legal challenges, but he won't fight directly. His sister Victoria is more dangerous. She's smart, connected, and she genuinely believes people like you don't deserve to breathe their air. And Margaret Ashford, your ex-fiancée? Proud, intelligent. She'll be hurt, but she'll hide it behind ice and good breeding." Lucas's expression was unreadable. "Her father, Richard Ashford, controls most of the banking in this territory. He'll see this as a personal insult and try to crush me financially." "Can he?" "He can make things difficult, but I've been preparing for war since I was 12 years old." Lucas's smile was sharp. "I just didn't expect the battlefield to be my own marriage." Clara absorbed that. "Anyone else I should worry about?" "Senator Graham and his wife Eleanor. They hold the keys to territorial politics. If we can win them over, half the battle is done." He paused. "They're hosting a dinner party next week. We're invited." Clara's stomach dropped. "Next week? I'm not ready." "You'll have to be." Lucas's voice was firm, but not unkind. "That party will be our first public appearance as a married couple. Everyone will be watching, judging, looking for cracks. We can't show them any." "No pressure, then?" "None at all." But his eyes held sympathy. "I know this is overwhelming, Clara, but you walked 17 miles through a blizzard yesterday. You survived Theodore Hartwell's cruelty. You can survive a dinner party." "Can I?" "Yes." He said it with absolute certainty. "Because you're stronger than they are. They were born into wealth and power. You earned every breath you've taken. That makes you dangerous." Clara wanted to believe him, but as night fell and she retreated to her enormous bedroom, the one that still felt like it belonged to someone else, doubt crept in like frost. She stood at the window, looking out at the dark expanse of the ranch. Somewhere out there, Theodore Hartwell was plotting. Margaret Ashford was nursing her wounded pride. Society was sharpening its knives, and Clara was supposed to face them all while pretending to be someone she wasn't. A knock at the door made her turn. Lucas entered, carrying a small wooden box. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering it to her. Clara opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a band of white gold with a single diamond that caught the lamplight. "It was my mother's," Lucas said quietly. "She wore it every day until she died. I want you to have it." Clara stared at the ring, her throat tight. "Lucas, I can't. This is too much." "You're my wife now. Legally, publicly." He took the ring from the box and held it out. "People will expect to see a ring, and I'd rather you wear something real than something we bought to fool investigators." Clara extended her hand, trembling. Lucas slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" "I didn't. It's luck, or fate." His smile was slight. "My mother would have said it was meant to be." Clara looked at the ring on her finger, the physical proof of a marriage built on lies. But the weight of it felt real, solid, grounding. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas nodded and turned to leave. At the door he paused. "Clara, for what it's worth, I don't regret this. Whatever happens, I don't regret choosing you." Then he was gone, and Clara was alone with her thoughts and her new ring, and the terrifying knowledge that tomorrow she'd wake up as Mrs. Lucas Blackstone. The woman who didn't exist 24 hours ago. The woman she now had to become. The next 5 days passed in brutal preparation. Sarah drilled Clara relentlessly on etiquette, fashion, and society politics. Lucas coached her on business matters, teaching her enough about cattle, land contracts, and territorial law to hold basic conversations. She learned to drink wine without grimacing, to laugh at jokes she didn't find funny, to smile when she wanted to scream. On the third day, a package arrived. New dresses, shoes, gloves, everything a rancher's wife would need. Clara tried them on, feeling like a child playing dress-up in her mother's closet. But when she looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back. Someone elegant. Someone who belonged. "You're getting better," Sarah said, adjusting the drape of a sapphire gown. "Your posture is almost natural now." "I still feel like a fraud." Everyone feels like a fraud until they've been pretending long enough that it becomes real. Sarah met her eyes. The trick is surviving that long. On the 5th day, Lucas received a letter. Clara watched his expression darken as he read it. "What is it?" "Theodore Hartwell's investigators." He crumpled the paper. "They're requesting our marriage records, correspondence, anything proving our relationship predates the engagement announcement." Clara's heart hammered. "Do we have any of that?" "We will by tomorrow." Lucas's smile was cold. "I have people who specialize in creating paper trails. Letters, receipts, witness statements, all properly aged and documented." "That's forgery." "That's survival." He looked at her steadily. "Are you having second thoughts?" Clara thought about the alternative. "No, but I wish we didn't have to lie so much." "The biggest lie was already told. Everything else is just supporting evidence." Lucas stood, offering his hand. "Come on, we need to practice dancing." "Dancing?" "The Grahams' dinner party will end with dancing. If we look uncomfortable together, people will notice." He pulled her to her feet. "Sarah, put on something with a waltz tempo." Sarah moved to the gramophone in the corner, and soon music filled the study. Lucas pulled Clara close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. "Relax," he murmured. "You're stiff as a board." "I've never danced with anyone before." "Then follow my lead. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He guided her through the steps, patient when she stumbled, firm when she resisted. "Better. Now look at me, not your feet." Clara raised her eyes to his face. This close, she could see the scar through his eyebrow, the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, the slight crook in his nose from an old break. "What happened there?" she asked, nodding at the scar. "Cattle thief with a knife." "I was 18. His smile was grim. "I won. He didn't." "You killed him?" "I defended what was mine." No apology in his voice. "This territory doesn't forgive weakness, Clara. Remember that." They danced in silence for a while, the music swirling around them. Clara found herself relaxing despite everything, letting Lucas guide her through the movements. He was surprisingly graceful for a man built like a weapon. "You're thinking too much," he said quietly. "I have a lot to think about." "Think about this instead. In 2 days, we'll walk into the Graham's house as husband and wife. Everyone will be watching. If we look happy, or at least comfortable, we win the first round. And if we don't, then Theodore wins, and we both lose everything." His hand tightened at her waist. "So we don't fail. Simple as that." The music ended. They stood together in the sudden silence, still touching, still close enough that Clara could feel the heat radiating from his body. "We should practice more tomorrow," Lucas said, his voice rough. "Yes," Clara agreed. Neither of them moved. Sarah cleared her throat loudly from across the room. "I'll just be going now. You two carry on." She left, and the door clicked shut behind her. Lucas stepped back, putting careful distance between them. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we finalize the forged correspondence, and then the next day is the party." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. That night she lay in bed, turning the ring on her finger around and around, feeling the weight of it. Downstairs she could hear Lucas moving through the house, checking locks, banking fires. The sounds of a man protecting what was his. She was part of that now. His wife, his possession, his gamble. Clara closed her eyes and tried to imagine the dinner party. The faces, the judgment, the 1,000 ways she could fail. But all she could see was Lucas's expression when he'd slid the ring onto her finger. "Real," he'd said. He wanted her to wear something real.
even though everything else was a lie. The morning of the dinner party, Clara woke before dawn, her stomach churning with nerves. She found Lucas already up, standing at his study window, coffee in hand. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "I stopped sleeping well years ago." He turned to look at her. "But today, yes. I'm concerned." "About what specifically?" "There are so many options." His mouth quirked. "Your sense of humor is improving. That's good. You'll need it tonight." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. We need to go over the guest list one more time." They spent 2 hours reviewing names, faces, relationships, scandals. Who to charm, who to avoid, who held real power versus who just pretended to. Lucas was merciless in his assessments. "Eleanor Graham is the key," he said. "Win her over, and half the room follows. She's smart, observant, and she values authenticity, or what passes for it." "How do I win her over?" "Don't try too hard. She hates obvious manipulation." Lucas leaned forward. "Be yourself, but the best version. Smart, strong, unafraid. She respects spine." "What about her husband, the senator?" "He'll follow Eleanor's lead. He always does." Lucas's smile was slight. "She's the real power in that marriage, though they'd never admit it publicly." At noon, Sarah appeared with the dress, midnight blue silk that shimmered like water when Clara moved. It was stunning and terrifying in equal measure. "You'll outshine every woman there," Sarah said, lacing up the back, "which will make them hate you, but they'll hate you anyway, so you might as well look beautiful while they're doing it." Clara stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked confident, elegant, born to this life. But her eyes betrayed her, wide with fear. "I can't do this," she whispered. "You can, and you will." Sarah turned her around, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. Those people in that room, they're not better than you. They're just richer, and half of them are hiding secrets worse than yours." "How do you know?" "Because I've dressed enough of them to know what they hide under their fancy clothes." Sarah's eyes were fierce. "You walked 17 miles through a blizzard. You survived Theodore Hartwell's cruelty. You married a man you barely knew to save yourself. You're stronger than every single person you'll meet tonight." "Then why am I so scared?" "Because you're smart enough to know what's at stake." Sarah squeezed her shoulders. "Fear is fine. Just don't let them see it." The carriage ride to the Grahams' estate was silent. Clara sat across from Lucas, watching the countryside roll past, trying to control her breathing. Lucas had barely spoken since they left, his expression carved from stone. "Lucas?" He looked up. "Yes?" "What if I fail tonight? What if I say the wrong thing, use the wrong fork, give them the proof they're looking for?" Lucas reached across the space between them and took her hand, the one wearing his mother's ring. "Then we adapt," he said quietly. "Clara, I didn't choose you because I thought you'd be perfect. I chose you because you survived. That's all we need to do tonight. Survive." His hand was warm, solid, real. Clara held onto it like a lifeline as the carriage rolled toward the Grahams' mansion and the battle that waited inside. The Graham estate blazed with light against the darkening sky, every window a golden eye watching their approach. Carriages lined the curved drive, depositing Montana's elite onto marble steps where servants waited with practiced deference. Clara's fingers tightened around Lucas's hand as their carriage joined the queue. "Remember," Lucas murmured, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "We're in love. Or at least happily married. Whatever happens in there, we present a united front." Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. The carriage stopped. The door opened. Lucas stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand with the kind of natural gallantry that made Clara's heart skip despite everything. She took it, stepping down onto the drive in her midnight blue gown, and felt the weight of a dozen stares land on her like physical blows. Conversation stuttered, heads turned. A woman in crimson silk actually stopped mid-step to stare. "Ignore them," Lucas said quietly, tucking her hand into the crook of his elbow. "Eyes forward, chin up. You belong here." They climbed the steps together. At the entrance, a butler announced them in a voice that carried across the foyer, "Mr. and Mrs. Lucas Blackstone." The effect was immediate. The crowd parted like a curtain being drawn back, revealing Senator Graham and his wife Eleanor at the far end of the hall.
Eleanor was tall, silver-haired, draped in emerald silk that probably cost more than Clara's father had earned in his lifetime. Her eyes were sharp as cut glass as she watched them approach. "Lucas," Eleanor said warmly, extending her hand, "how wonderful to see you, and this must be your bride." "Eleanor, Senator." Lucas shook the senator's hand, then gestured to Clara. "May I present my wife, Clara?" Clara executed the curtsy Sarah had drilled into her, keeping her spine straight, her expression serene. "Mrs. Graham, thank you for including us in your evening. The pleasure is entirely ours." Eleanor's assessment was thorough and unhidden. "Though I must confess your marriage came as quite a surprise. We'd heard Lucas was engaged to Margaret Ashford." "Arrangements change," Lucas said smoothly. "When you meet the right person, everything else becomes irrelevant." "How romantic." Eleanor's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "And where did you two meet, my dear? I don't recall seeing you in our social circles before." The first test. Clara felt Lucas's arm tense beneath her fingers, but she kept her voice steady. "We met at a charity event in Helena 6 months ago. I was visiting a friend. Lucas was there on business." "And it was love at first sight?" "Hardly." Clara allowed herself a small smile. "I thought he was arrogant. He thought I was stubborn. It took 3 more meetings before we realized we were both right, and that we rather liked those qualities in each other." Eleanor's laugh was genuine, surprised. "Well,
You're honest, at least. That's refreshing." She turned to her husband. "James, take Lucas to meet the territorial commissioner. I'm sure they have business to discuss. I'd like to get to know Clara better." It was not a request. Lucas hesitated, his eyes finding Clara's. She gave him the smallest nod. This was what they'd prepared for: separation, individual scrutiny, the test of whether their story held up under pressure. "Of course." Lucas raised Clara's hand to his lips, the gesture practiced, but the heat in his eyes convincingly real. "I'll find you soon." Then he was gone, swept into the crowd by Senator Graham, and Clara was alone with Eleanor Graham's calculating gaze. "Walk with me," Eleanor said, linking her arm through Clara's before she could protest. "I want to show you the gardens. They're quite lovely at night." They stepped through French doors onto a terrace lit by paper lanterns. The garden stretched beyond, manicured and perfect, everything in its designated place. Clara felt the metaphor land like a stone. "You're very beautiful," Eleanor said casually. "But I suspect you know that. What I'm more interested in is whether you're clever." "I'd like to think so, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient." Eleanor stopped at the terrace railing, turning to face Clara fully. "Here's the situation, my dear. Lucas Blackstone is one of the most powerful men in this territory. His marriage matters, politically, socially, economically. His sudden union with an unknown seamstress has caused quite a stir." "I'm aware." "Are you?" Eleanor's eyes were merciless. "Because what I'm trying to determine is whether you're a fortune hunter who saw an opportunity, or whether Lucas actually cares about you. The difference matters to me." Clara's pulse hammered, but she held Eleanor's gaze. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because Lucas's mother was my friend." Eleanor's voice softened fractionally. "She died when Lucas was 17. I promised her I'd watch over him. So far, I've seen him build an empire, destroy enemies, and nearly marry a woman he didn't love for political gain. This, you, is the first thing he's done that doesn't fit a calculated pattern. Maybe I'm the calculation. Maybe. But I saw how he looked at you just now." Eleanor tilted her head. "That wasn't calculation. That was concern. Almost fear. Lucas Blackstone doesn't fear anything except losing what's his." Clara's breath caught. Before she could respond, voices drifted from inside, raised, angry, unmistakable. Theodore Hartwell had arrived. Eleanor's expression hardened. "That boy is a viper. Come, let's see what poison he's brought tonight." They returned to the ballroom to find Theodore holding court near the fireplace, his face flushed with wine and malice. He saw Clara and Eleanor enter, and his smile turned predatory. "Ah, there she is," he announced loudly. "The mysterious Mrs. Blackstone. Tell me, my dear, how does it feel to rise so far, so fast?" The room went quiet.
Clara felt every eye turn toward her, measuring, judging, waiting for her to fail. Lucas appeared at her side instantly, his presence a wall of controlled fury. "Careful, Theodore." "I'm simply making conversation." Theodore's eyes glittered. "Though I must say, I've been trying to verify the details of your whirlwind romance. Funny thing, I can't seem to find any record of Clara Whitmore existing in Helena 6 months ago. No hotel registrations, no church attendance, nothing." "Perhaps you're looking in the wrong places," Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Or perhaps there's nothing to find." Theodore stepped closer. "Perhaps this entire marriage is a fraud designed to save Lucas from his engagement to Margaret. Perhaps you're just a desperate girl he bought to serve his purposes. That's enough. That's—" Lucas's voice was lethal quiet. "You're drunk and making wild accusations. Apologize to my wife or leave." "I'll do neither." Theodore's smile was vicious. "But I will continue my investigation, and when I prove this marriage is a sham, I'll see you both destroyed." "Mr. Hartwell," Eleanor Graham's voice cut like a blade, "you're embarrassing yourself and insulting my guests. I suggest you step outside to clear your head before I have you removed." Theodore's face went purple. "Mrs. Graham, surely you can't believe—" "What I believe is that you're behaving like a spoiled child who didn't get his way." Eleanor's tone could have frozen whiskey. "Lucas and Clara are legally married. Unless you have proof otherwise, real proof, not drunken speculation, I suggest you keep your theories to yourself." For a moment, Theodore looked ready to explode. Then he grabbed a glass from a passing servant, drained it, and stalked toward the door. But before he left, he turned back to Clara. "I'll find the truth," he said quietly. "And when I do, you'll wish you'd stayed in whatever gutter Lucas pulled you from." He disappeared into the night. The room exhaled collectively, conversations resuming in hushed, excited tones. Eleanor squeezed Clara's arm. "Well handled, my dear. You didn't flinch." "I wanted to," Clara admitted. "But you didn't. That's what matters." Eleanor's smile was approving. "Come, let me introduce you to some people who aren't venomous snakes. You'll need allies in the battles ahead." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and careful conversation. Clara met ranchers, lawyers, politicians' wives, businessmen who sized her up like livestock at auction. She smiled until her face ached, answered questions about her fictional past, laughed at jokes she didn't find funny. And through it all, she felt Lucas watching her, a constant presence just out of reach, ready to intervene if she stumbled. But she didn't stumble. She was tired, terrified, but she didn't break. When dinner was announced, Lucas materialized at her side, offering his arm. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured as they moved toward the dining room. "Theodore hates us." "Theodore hated us before we arrived. Nothing's changed. He's going to keep investigating." "Let him." Lucas's jaw tightened. "The paper trail we created will hold, and if it doesn't, we'll deal with it." They were seated near the head of the table, close to the Grahams, a position of honor that made Clara's stomach twist. She counted 7 forks beside her plate and sent up a silent prayer of thanks for Sarah's brutal training. The woman across from her, Victoria Hartwell, Theodore's sister, watched Clara select the correct fork for her salad with visible disappointment. "You've learned quickly," Victoria observed, her tone suggesting this was not a compliment. "Most girls from your background wouldn't know a fish fork from a pitchfork." Clara met her eyes. "My background taught me that survival requires adaptation. I'm a quick study." Clearly, Victoria's smile was ice. "Though I wonder what else you've learned to do quickly. Securing a wealthy husband, for instance." Victoria. The man beside her, her husband, Clara recalled, touched her arm in warning. "This is an appropriate dinner conversation. I'm simply curious about our new guest." Victoria turned to Lucas. "Tell me, Lucas, what attracted you to Clara? Beyond the obvious desperation?" Lucas's expression went dangerous. Clara felt his leg tense against hers beneath the table, saw his hand tighten on his wine glass. She put her hand over his, a gesture of restraint and unity. "What attracted Lucas to me," Clara said clearly, "is the same thing that attracted me to him. We recognized in each other a refusal to accept the limitations others tried to impose." He saw someone who'd walked 17 miles through a blizzard seeking work. "I saw someone who'd built an empire from nothing. We're both survivors, Mrs. Hartwell.
Perhaps that's a language people born wealthy don't speak. Silence fell across their section of the table. Victoria's face had gone chalk white. Then Eleanor Graham laughed, loud, genuine, delighted. Well said, my dear. She raised her glass. To Clara Blackstone, who clearly knows how to handle herself in any storm. The toast was echoed around the table, though Victoria's glass remained on the table, her expression murderous. Lucas's hand found Clara's beneath the tablecloth, squeezing gently. A message. You're magnificent. The rest of dinner passed in tense civility. By the time dessert was cleared and the ladies retired to the drawing room while the men discussed business over brandy, Clara felt wrung out and hollow. She found a quiet corner, accepting tea from a servant and trying to become invisible. It didn't work. Margaret Ashford appeared like a ghost in cream silk, her face carefully composed but her eyes bright with hurt and fury. Clara Whitmore, she said softly. Or should I say Blackstone? We haven't been properly introduced. Clara stood, her heart hammering. Miss Ashford, I... Save it. Margaret's voice was quiet enough that no one else could hear. I don't want apologies or explanations. I want the truth. Did you know about our engagement when you seduced Lucas? I didn't seduce anyone. Then how did this happen? Margaret's composure cracked. 3 weeks ago, Lucas and I were planning a wedding. Now he's married to you and I'm humiliated in front of everyone I know. So tell me, what did you do to make him throw away everything? Clara looked at this woman, beautiful, educated, everything Clara wasn't, and saw pain beneath the anger, real pain. I didn't do anything, she said honestly. Lucas made his choice. I'm as surprised by it as you are. I don't believe you. That's your right. Clara met her eyes. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry you were hurt. That was never my intention. Your intentions don't matter. Margaret's smile was bitter. The result is the same. You won. I lost. And now I get to smile and pretend my heart wasn't just publicly broken by a man who chose a seamstress over me. She turned to leave, then paused. Just know this, she said quietly. My father won't forgive this. And when Richard Ashford decides to destroy someone, he doesn't stop until there's nothing left. Then she was gone, leaving Clara alone with the weight of that threat. The men rejoined them an hour later, and the evening shifted to dancing. Lucas found Clara immediately, pulling her into his arms for a waltz as the orchestra began. You survived, he murmured, guiding her through the steps they'd practiced. Barely. Margaret Ashford cornered me. His expression darkened. What did she say? That her father is going to destroy us. Clara looked up at him. Lucas, I met her. She's hurt, really hurt. Maybe we should... Should what? Confess? Walk away? He shook his head. We're past that point, Clara. The only path now is forward. They danced in silence, the music swirling around them. Clara was aware of eyes watching, whispers following their movements. The beautiful couple, the scandal, the lie made flesh. Thank you, Lucas said suddenly. For what? For how you handled Victoria. That response about survivors, that was perfect. His eyes held hers. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I had good teachers. Your mother's ring helps too. She glanced at the diamond-catching lamplight. It makes me feel like I have a right to be here. You do have a right. His voice was fierce. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The music ended. They separated reluctantly, and Clara was immediately claimed by Senator Graham for the next dance. My wife is quite taken with you, he said, as they began a slower waltz. That's rare. Eleanor doesn't trust easily. I'm honored by her kindness. Don't be too honored. She's also ruthless when crossed. His eyes twinkled. But she sees something in you. Resilience, maybe. She values that. Senator, may I ask you something? Of course. Why does everyone care so much about Lucas's marriage? He's a rancher, not royalty. Graham laughed. My dear, Lucas Blackstone controls more land and resources than half the established families combined. Who he marries, who he allies with, it affects the entire territorial economy. Political power, business contracts, land rights. It all flows through relationships. He paused.
Your marriage to Lucas shifted the balance of power. That terrifies some people. And you? Me? I find it fascinating. His smile was sly. And potentially useful. Lucas has always been difficult to predict.
But a man in love, or claiming to be, that's a different kind of vulnerable. Claire's blood chilled. You think you can manipulate him through me? I think everyone has leverage. The question is whether you'll be Lucas's weakness or his strength. Graham's expression turned serious. Choose carefully, Mrs. Blackstone. This territory doesn't forgive mistakes. The dance ended. Clara curtsied mechanically and escaped to the terrace, needing air, space, anything to clear her head. She found Lucas there, alone, staring out at the gardens. They're all playing games, she said, joining him at the railing. Eleanor, the senator, Margaret, Theodore. Everyone has an angle. Welcome to society. His voice was bitter. Everyone wants something. The trick is making sure they need you more than you need them. Is that what we are? A trick? Lucas turned to face her fully. I don't know what we are anymore. This started as survival, a transaction. But tonight, watching you hold your own against people who've spent their entire lives learning to destroy others. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. You're not what I expected, Clara. What did you expect? Someone I could protect, manage, control. His laugh was harsh. But you don't need protection. You need ammunition, and I'm starting to think you're more dangerous than all of them combined. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted from inside. Shouting, the crash of breaking glass, Eleanor Graham's voice raised in fury. They ran back inside to find chaos. Theodore was back, swaying drunk, pointing at Lucas with a document clutched in his hand. Fraud! He shouted. I have proof. That marriage certificate, the dates are wrong. The judge's signature doesn't match his records. Lucas went very still. Clara felt the world tilt. You're drunk and delusional, Lucas said coldly. Am I? Theodore waved the paper. I hired a documents expert. He found discrepancies. This certificate was backdated, poorly, which means your marriage is a lie. The room held its breath. Clara saw Eleanor's expression shift from anger to calculation. Senator Graham's eyes narrowed. Margaret Ashford looked vindicated and devastated in equal measure. That's a serious accusation, Lucas said quietly. You have proof? Right here. Theodore thrust the document forward. Lucas took it, studied it, then did something Clara didn't expect. He laughed. This? He held up the paper. This isn't our marriage certificate, you idiot. This is the decorative copy we had made for framing. Of course it looks different. It was done by a calligrapher, not the court clerk. Theodore's face went purple. That's a lie. The real certificate is filed with the territorial clerk's office. Judge Morrison notarized it himself. You can verify it tomorrow when the office opens. Lucas's voice was ice. But tonight, you've publicly accused me of fraud based on a decorative document in front of witnesses. Theodore stammered. That's slander. Senator Graham's voice cut through the chaos. Actionable slander, if Lucas chooses to pursue it. Theodore looked around wildly, realizing his mistake. Victoria had gone pale. Margaret was staring at him with disgust. Get out, Eleanor said quietly. And Theodore? Don't come back. Not to my house. Not until you've learned to control yourself. Theodore fled, his sister following. The crowd erupted in whispers. Lucas turned to Clara, and she saw it in his eyes, relief, triumph, and something that looked almost like admiration. Let's go home, he said quietly. They made their goodbyes, accepted Eleanor's warm embrace and the senator's knowing smile, and escaped to their carriage. The moment the door closed, Clara started shaking. That was too close, she whispered. If he'd actually found the real certificate, but he didn't. Lucas pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his warmth. The forgery held. Theodore made a fool of himself, and now everyone thinks he's a drunk making wild accusations. For now, but he won't stop. No. Lucas's arms tightened around her. He won't. Which means we need to be smarter, faster, always one step ahead. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the carriage rock beneath them, carrying them away from the battlefield and toward temporary safety. Lucas? Yes? Tonight, when you defended me, when you stood by the lie. She paused, searching for words. Why does it feel more real than anything I've ever done? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he said finally, but I feel it too. They rode the rest of the way in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, the lie between them growing roots deeper than either had intended. And somewhere in the darkness, Theodore Hartwell was planning his next move. The following week brought an uneasy quiet that felt more like the eye of a storm than actual peace. Clara woke each morning expecting catastrophe, investigators at the door, newspapers screaming fraud, Theodore triumphant with real proof. But the days passed in strange normalcy. Lucas managed his ranch. Claire continued her lessons with Sarah. They ate dinner together, discussing cattle prices and territorial politics like an ordinary married couple, except nothing about them was ordinary. You're distracted, Lucas said one evening as they sat in his study, Clara supposedly reading while he worked through contracts. What's wrong? Clara set down her book. It's too quiet. Theodore hasn't made another move. Margaret's father hasn't called in Lucas's loans. It feels like they're waiting for something. They probably are. Lucas didn't look up from his paperwork. Waiting for us to make a mistake. Get comfortable. Drop our guard. So what do? We don't drop our guard. He signed a document with sharp strokes. And we start building something they can't tear down even if they discover the truth. Like what? Lucas finally met her eyes. Legitimacy. Not just legal legitimacy. We have that. Social legitimacy. We make ourselves so valuable to this territory that destroying us would hurt everyone. Eleanor's already halfway to being an ally. If we can secure a few more key relationships, Theodore's accusations become background noise. How do we do that? By being useful. He stood, moving to the map of Montana Territory mounted on his wall. There's a land dispute brewing between the ranchers in the Northern Valley and the railroad company. Both sides are dug in. If we can broker a compromise, we become indispensable. Clara joined him at the map. Why would they listen to us? Because I have land they need for their routes. And you, he glanced at her, you're the unknown variable, someone without established loyalties, someone who might actually be objective. I don't know anything about land disputes or railroads. You know about survival, about finding solutions when there aren't any obvious ones. His finger traced the disputed territory. That's all negotiation is, Clara. Survival dressed up in legal language. Before Clara could respond, rapid footsteps sounded in the hall. Sarah burst through the door, her face ashen. Lucas, you need to see this. She thrust a newspaper at him. Clara saw the headline over his shoulder and felt her stomach drop. Blackstone marriage under investigation. Territorial attorney launches inquiry. Lucas read in silence, his expression going darker with each line. When he finished, he crumpled the paper and threw it against the wall. Richard Ashford, he said quietly. Margaret's father. He got to the territorial attorney. What does it mean? Clara's voice shook. It means they're coming with legal authority. Not just Theodore's drunk accusations. Official investigation. Lucas paced like a caged wolf. They'll subpoena records, question witnesses, examine every detail of our story. The forged documents will hold. They're good forgeries. But it means we're under a microscope now. He stopped, running both hands through his hair. I should have anticipated this. Should have moved faster to secure allies. Can we stop it? Maybe, if we give them something bigger to worry about. Lucas's eyes were calculating. Sarah, send word to the Northern Valley ranchers. Tell them I'm calling a meeting, tomorrow. Lucas, what are you planning? Clara asked. A distraction. If we can solve the railroad dispute, we become heroes. The Attorney General won't want to take down the people who just saved the territory from economic collapse. His smile was sharp. Politics is about leverage, Clara. We're about to create some. The meeting was held in the Blackstone Ranch House, the great room packed with weather-beaten ranchers who looked at Clara with open suspicion. She stood beside Lucas at the head of the table, feeling utterly out of place among these men who smelled of cattle and gunpowder. Thank you for coming, Lucas began. I know you're wondering why I called you here, especially given the recent attention on my personal life. We heard the rumors, a grizzled rancher said bluntly. That true? Your marriage a fraud? No. Lucas's voice was steel. What's true is that powerful people are trying to destroy me for making choices they didn't approve. But my marriage isn't why you're here. The railroad dispute is. He unfurled a map across the table. The Montana Pacific wants to run tracks through the Northern Valley, your land. They're offering prices below market value and threatening eminent domain if you don't sell. We know all this, another rancher growled. What we don't know is how to stop it. You don't stop it, Clara said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. She felt Lucas's surprise but pushed forward. You negotiate. Give them what they need, access, but on your terms. Who the hell is she to tell us? She's my wife, Lucas cut in. And she has a point. Keep talking, Clara. Clara moved to the map, her hands shaking but her voice steady. The railroad needs a direct route east, but they don't need to own all your land, just an easement for the tracks. Sell them the right to build, not the land itself. You keep ownership, keep grazing rights, and charge them ongoing access fees. The room was silent. That's not how railroads work, someone said finally. It's not how they usually work, Clara agreed. But if you present a united front, all of you together, they'll have to negotiate. The alternative is years of legal battles over eminent domain, which costs them time and money. The ranchers exchanged glances. Lucas was watching Clara with something that looked like pride. She's right, he said. The railroad's on a deadline. They need to break ground by summer or lose their federal funding. If you band together, you have leverage. And what do you get out of this? The grizzled rancher's eyes were shrewd. You don't have land in the Northern Valley. I get you as allies, Lucas said simply. The territorial attorney is investigating me. I need people who'll vouch for my character. Help me with this, and I'll help you negotiate terms that actually favor ranchers for once. There was a long pause. Then the ranchers began to nod, slowly, grudgingly. All right, Blackstone, the grizzled one said. We'll try it your way, but if this goes bad, it won't, Clara said with more confidence than she felt. We won't let it. The meeting dispersed with plans to approach the railroad as a collective. Lucas walked the ranchers out, leaving Clara alone in the great room, staring at the map and wondering what she'd just committed them to. When Lucas returned, he pulled her into his arms without warning. That was brilliant, he said against her hair. Where did that come from? I don't know. Clara's heart was racing. I just kept thinking about how my father's mining collective bargained with the company. United Front, clear demands. It worked for them. It'll work for us too. He pulled back to look at her. You're not just surviving anymore, Clara. You're building something. Their eyes held, and Clara felt the air between them shift, charged, dangerous, crossing lines they'd carefully drawn. Lucas stepped back first, clearing his throat. We should prepare for the attorney's investigators. They'll be here soon. But that night, as Clara lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the warmth of his arms, the pride in his voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was exactly where she belonged. The lie was becoming something else, something neither of them had planned for. The territorial attorney's investigators arrived 3 days later, 2 men in dark suits with papers that gave them authority to examine everything. Clara watched from the study window as they approached, her stomach tight with dread. Remember the story, Lucas said quietly beside her. We met in Helena, 6 months of courtship, private ceremony, every detail exactly as we practiced. I remember. And Clara? He turned her to face him. Don't be afraid of them. You've done nothing wrong. We're married legally. That's all that matters. The investigators spent 6 hours combing through the house. They questioned Clara separately from Lucas, trying to find contradictions. They examined the marriage certificate with magnifying glasses and chemical tests. They asked about letters, gifts, witnesses. Clara stuck to the story, her voice steady even as her palms sweated. Yes, they'd met in Helena. No, it hadn't been love at first sight. Yes, the quick marriage had surprised her too, but when you know, you know. The lead investigator, a thin man named Parsons with cold eyes, watched her like a hawk studying prey. Mrs. Blackstone, you must understand how this looks, he said. Mr. Blackstone was engaged to Margaret Ashford. Then suddenly, he's married to you. A woman with no social connections, no family of note, no obvious reason for him to risk his reputation. Perhaps that's exactly why, Clara said quietly. I didn't want his money or his connections. I wanted him. How convenient. No, Mr. Parsons, it wasn't convenient at all. It's been terrifying. But it's real. She met his eyes. You're looking for fraud. I understand that. But you won't find it, because it doesn't exist. Parsons stared at her for a long moment, then made a note. We'll see. When they finally left, Clara found Lucas in the stables, grooming his horse with aggressive strokes that spoke to barely contained fury. They don't believe us, she said. Not yet. Lucas didn't stop working. But they don't have proof either. The marriage certificate is legitimate. Judge Morrison stands by it. The paper trail holds. They're looking for cracks that aren't there. What if they manufacture cracks? Lucas's hand stilled on the horse's flank. Then we fight. But Clara, he turned to face her, we might need to consider something I didn't want to suggest.
What? Making this real, not just legally real, actually real. He saw her expression and rushed on. I don't mean immediately, I mean over time. If we can convince ourselves, we can convince anyone. Clara's breath caught. You want to actually fall in love? I want to stop pretending. His eyes were dark, intense. Because the truth is, I'm not sure I'm pretending anymore.
Before Clara could respond, a ranch hand burst into the stable, breathless. Mr. Blackstone! Fire! The Northern Valley ranchers! Someone's burning their property! They rode out immediately, Lucas and Clara and half a dozen ranch hands, pushing their horses hard toward the plume of smoke rising from the valley. When they arrived, 3 barns were burning, flames consuming decades of work, while ranchers fought desperately to save their livestock. The grizzled rancher from the meeting, his name was Patterson, stood watching his life burn, his face carved from grief and rage. Who did this? Lucas demanded. Railroad men. Had to be. Patterson's voice was raw. They came yesterday with new offers. We said no, we're negotiating as a group like you suggested. This morning, my barns are burning. Did anyone see them? My son saw riders leaving before dawn. Too dark to identify. Patterson turned to Lucas. This is what happens when we stand up to them. They burn us out. Clara stared at the flames, thinking furiously. This wasn't just about the railroad anymore. This was about power, intimidation, the age-old tactic of destroying those who wouldn't submit. We need proof, she said. Real proof they did this, otherwise it's just accusations. How do we get proof? Lucas asked. We catch them doing it again. Clara turned to Patterson. How many of you refused the railroad's offers? 7 ranches, all of us who came to the meeting. Then they'll hit the others too, tonight probably, while you're all focused on this fire. She looked at Lucas. We set a trap. Pick the most vulnerable ranch, guard it, catch them in the act. Lucas's eyes widened. That's dangerous. So is doing nothing. Clara's jaw set. You said politics is about leverage. Well, catching railroad thugs committing arson? That's leverage. Patterson was nodding slowly. The Henderson place. It's most isolated. If I was planning another attack, that's where I'd hit. Then that's where we'll be, Lucas said. He turned to his ranch hands. Get the rifles. We ride for Henderson's at sunset. They left Patterson coordinating firefighting efforts and rode hard for the Henderson ranch, a small spread tucked against the mountains, vulnerable and alone. Henderson himself was a young man with a pregnant wife and more courage than sense. I won't abandon my home, he said when Lucas explained the plan. We're not asking you to, Clara said gently. We're asking you to let us help defend it. They spent the afternoon preparing. Lucas positioned his men around the property, hidden in the barn, behind the fence line, in the tree line beyond. Clara insisted on staying despite Lucas's protests. If this goes wrong, he started, then we face it together. She checked the small pistol Sarah had taught her to shoot. I'm not hiding while you fight my battles. Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. Stay behind me, he said. Please. They waited as darkness fell, tension coiling tighter with each passing hour. Henderson's wife watched from the house, her hand on her swollen belly, her eyes wide with fear. Midnight came and went. Clara was starting to think they'd guessed wrong when Lucas stiffened beside her. "Riders," he whispered. "6 of them, coming from the east." Clara's heart hammered as shapes materialized from the darkness. Men on horseback, carrying torches and something that sloshed in containers. Kerosene. They dismounted quietly, spreading out toward the barn. One of them laughed, low and cruel, as he splashed kerosene against the wooden wall. "Now," Lucas breathed. Light flooded the yard as Henderson threw open the barn doors. Lucas's men emerged from their hiding spots, rifles raised. "Drop the torches," Lucas's voice rang out. "You're surrounded." The railroad men froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of them reached for his gun. The gunshot cracked like thunder. The man screamed, clutching his shoulder. Lucas had fired a warning shot past his head, but the message was clear. "Next one goes in your chest," Lucas said calmly. "Drop your weapons. Now." They complied, throwing down guns and torches, hands raised. Lucas's men moved in, binding them quickly. Clara approached the kerosene containers, reading the labels. "Montana Pacific Railroad Company," she said aloud. "Shipped to the Great Falls Depot last month." "That's not proof," one of the men snarled. "Anyone could have stolen those, but we have you," Lucas said. "Caught in the act of attempted arson, with railroad property, on the same night other ranches burned." He smiled coldly. "I think that's proof enough for the territorial marshal." They bound the men and sent riders for the authorities. While they waited, Clara noticed something. One of the captured men wore a ring identical to one Theodore Hartwell had worn at the Graham party. She pointed it out to Lucas. "Hartwell family crest," Lucas confirmed, his expression darkening. "Theodore's involved in this. Or his family is." Clara's mind raced. The Hartwells have money in the railroad. If the route gets delayed, they lose their investment. So they're willing to commit arson to force the ranchers to sell. Lucas's voice was ice. "This is bigger than we thought." The territorial marshal arrived at dawn with deputies and a judge. The captured men were questioned, and one, faced with hanging for arson, broke and confirmed everything. The railroad company, with financial backing from the Hartwell family, had hired them to intimidate holdout ranchers. By noon, arrest warrants were issued for 3 railroad executives and Theodore Hartwell himself. By evening, the story was in every newspaper in the territory. Clara and Lucas stood on their front porch, reading the headlines as the sun set over the mountains. The territorial attorney's investigation into their marriage had been quietly suspended, suddenly unimportant compared to a conspiracy involving arson, attempted murder, and corporate corruption. "We did it," Clara said quietly. "We stopped them." "You stopped them." Lucas turned to face her. "That trap was your idea, your plan. I just thought about what they'd do next." "You thought like someone who understands how power works." His eyes were intense. "You saved those ranchers, saved their livelihoods, and in the process, you saved us." Clara looked down at the ring on her finger, his mother's ring, still feeling too heavy, too real. "Lucas, what you said in the stable, about making this actually real, did you mean it?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Why?" He stepped closer, his hands framing her face. "Because when I saw you standing there with a gun, ready to fight beside me, I realized I'd stopped pretending weeks ago. Maybe from the moment I saw Theodore humiliate you and knew I couldn't walk away." "That's not love," Clara whispered. "That's protection. Obligation." "Then what is it when I can't sleep unless I know you're safe? When I trust your judgment over mine? When the thought of you leaving after a year feels like losing a limb?" His thumb brushed her cheek. "Tell me, Clara, what is that if not love?" Her breath caught. She thought about the weeks of living this lie, learning his rhythms, matching his stride, standing beside him against enemies neither had anticipated. She thought about how natural it felt to reach for his hand, to trust his judgment, to build something together out of ash and desperation. "It's terrifying," she said finally. "Yes." He smiled slightly. "But is it real?" Clara looked into his eyes, dark,
fierce, utterly sincere, and felt something inside her shift and settle like a bone clicking back into place. "Yes," she whispered. "It's real." Lucas kissed her then, not the careful brush of lips from their false wedding, but something deep and claiming and absolutely true. Clara kissed him back, pouring weeks of confusion and fear and unexpected feeling into it, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "The year isn't up," he said roughly. "You could still leave." "I know. Do you want to?" Clara thought about the girl who'd walked 17 miles through a blizzard, desperate and alone. She thought about the woman she'd become, someone who negotiated with ranchers, caught criminals, stood her ground against society's elite. She thought about this man who'd claimed her as his own to save her from humiliation, who'd bet everything on a stranger, who'd just kissed her like she was the answer to questions he'd stopped asking. "No," she said clearly. "I don't want to leave." Lucas pulled her close, and Clara felt his heart hammering against her chest, as wild and desperate as her own. They stood together on the porch as stars emerged overhead, wrapped in each other's arms, while inside the house Sarah hummed and pretended not to notice that everything had just changed. The lie they'd built was crumbling. But underneath, something stronger was taking root, something that didn't need forgery or careful stories or political maneuvering, something terrifyingly, magnificently real. And for the first time since that brutal winter night, Clara Whitmore, now truly Clara Blackstone, wasn't afraid of what came next. The morning after their kiss, Clara woke to find Lucas already gone from the house. She descended the stairs to find Sarah in the kitchen, a knowing smile playing at her lips as she poured coffee. "He left early," Sarah said without preamble. "Said he had business in town, but he looked different, lighter, somehow." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Sarah, don't." Sarah held up a hand, still smiling. "I've watched that man carry the weight of the world for years. Whatever happened between you two, it's the first time I've seen him look like he might actually want to keep living." She set the coffee cup in Clara's hands. "So don't explain. Just don't break his heart." "I'm more worried he'll break mine." "Then you're both finally in the same kind of danger." Sarah's expression softened. "That's what real marriage looks like, child. Mutual destruction or mutual salvation. You've chosen which one you're building." Before Clara could respond, hoofbeats thundered up the drive. She moved to the window to see Lucas riding hard, his face grim. Behind him, 3 ranch hands followed, all armed. Clara's stomach dropped. She met him at the door. "What's wrong?" "Theodore's been arrested," Lucas said, dismounting in one fluid motion. "But his father posted bail within an hour. Now the Hartwell family is calling in every favor they have, trying to bury the scandal." He paused, his jaw tight. "And they're coming after us directly. Richard Ashford just filed a lawsuit claiming our marriage defrauded his daughter of her rightful engagement." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Can he do that?" "He can try. It's legal theater. He knows it'll get thrown out eventually. But the publicity, the depositions, the scrutiny..." Lucas's eyes were dark. "He's trying to destroy us through exposure, force us to defend the marriage in court, under oath, where one slip could unravel everything." "Then we don't slip." "Clara, they'll question us separately, for hours. They'll ask about intimate details, private moments, things actual married couples would know about each other." He gripped her shoulders. "We've been living as strangers sharing a house. How do we convince a court we're truly married when we've barely..." He stopped, but Clara understood. They'd kissed once, slept in separate rooms, maintained careful boundaries even as feelings shifted beneath the surface. "Then we change that," she said quietly, "starting now." Lucas's eyes searched hers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we stop pretending to be married and actually be married." Clara's heart hammered, but her voice was steady. "No more separate rooms, no more careful distance. We become what we claim to be." "Clara, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She stepped closer, her hand finding his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. "But I want to. Not for the lawsuit or the scandal or the lies we've told. For us." Lucas pulled her against him, his forehead resting against hers.
If we do this, there's no going back. No pretending it was just strategy. Good, Clara whispered. I'm tired of pretending. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Clara felt the last walls between them crumble to dust. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation and transformation. Lucas moved Clara's belongings into his room, their room now. They learned each other in ways both intimate and ordinary, how he took his coffee, how she twisted her hair when thinking, the rhythm of shared mornings and whispered nights. Sarah watched the change with quiet approval, saying nothing but smiling more. The lawsuit depositions were scheduled for early October. Lucas hired the territory's best lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Wells, who didn't blink when Lucas explained the delicate nature of their situation.
So you married quickly, under unusual circumstances, and now you're being challenged on legitimacy, Catherine summarized. The good news is you're legally married. The bad news is Ashford will try to prove it was a fraudulent marriage of convenience. Can he win? Clara asked. Not if you two are actually in love. Catherine's gaze was assessing. Are you? Lucas's hand found Clara's. Yes. Then show it. In every answer, every gesture, every moment you're in that deposition room. Catherine leaned forward. They'll try to separate you, rattle you, find contradictions. But if what you're showing me now is real, they won't find any. The first deposition was Lucas's. Clara waited outside the lawyer's office, pacing the wooden floors, watching the sun crawl across the sky. When Lucas emerged 3 hours later, he looked exhausted but steady. How was it? Brutal. They asked everything. How we met, when I knew I loved you, what you look like when you sleep.
His smile was slight. But I told the truth. All of it. Clara's deposition came the next day. Richard Ashford's lawyer was a cold-eyed man named Morrison, who smiled like a shark and asked questions designed to humiliate. Mrs. Blackstone, you were a seamstress before marrying Mr. Blackstone, correct? Yes. Poor, desperate for work. I was seeking employment, yes. And then suddenly you're married to one of the wealthiest men in the territory. Morrison's smile was thin. Quite a fortunate turn of events. I married Lucas because I love him, Clara said evenly. His wealth was irrelevant. Was it? Morrison pulled out a document. We have testimony from servants at the Hartwell estate that Mr. Blackstone claimed you as his wife within minutes of meeting you, that he destroyed his engagement to my client's daughter on a whim. Does that sound like love to you, Mrs. Blackstone? Clara felt the trap closing. One wrong word and everything would collapse. It sounds like a man making an impulsive decision, she said carefully. But what followed wasn't impulse. We chose each other, every day, in ways that mattered. That's what love is. Not the moment you meet, but the moments you keep choosing each other. Morrison's expression flickered. He'd expected her to stumble, to contradict Lucas's testimony. Instead, she'd given him poetry. Tell me about your first kiss, he said abruptly. Clara smiled, remembering. Our wedding day. It was brief, formal. The real first kiss came weeks later, after we'd caught the men burning the Northern Valley ranches. We were standing on our porch, and Lucas told me he'd stopped pretending. I told him I had too. Convenient that this revelation came after you were already legally married. Convenient? Clara's voice hardened. Mr. Morrison, I've been called a fraud, a gold digger, and worse. I've been investigated, threatened, and dragged through public scandal. Nothing about this has been convenient. But it's real. The deposition continued for 2 more hours. By the end, Clara was wrung out and shaking, but she'd held her ground. Catherine Wells met her outside with an approving nod. You did well. Better than well. She glanced at her notes. Your testimonies align perfectly. Not scripted perfect, real perfect. The kind of small consistencies that come from actually living together. What happens now? Lucas asked, his arm around Clara's shoulders. Now we wait for Ashford to realize he's wasting his money. Catherine smiled. I give it 2 weeks before he drops the suit. She was wrong. It took 3 days. The withdrawal notice arrived with no explanation, just a terse legal document stating the case was dismissed with prejudice. Clara read it twice, unable to believe it. It's over? She asked Lucas. The lawsuit is. He set down the notice, his expression troubled. But I got word this morning. Theodore's been indicted for conspiracy and arson. He's facing prison time. That's good news, isn't it? It should be. Lucas moved to the window, staring out at the ranch. But Theodore's desperate now. Desperate men do dangerous things. Clara felt a chill. You think he'll come after us? I think he blames us for destroying his life, and I think we need to be careful. That night, Lucas doubled the guards around the property. Clara tried to sleep but couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching from the darkness beyond their windows. She was right to be afraid. The attack came 3 nights later, just after midnight. Clara woke to the smell of smoke and Lucas's hands pulling her from bed. Fire, he said urgently. The barn. Get dressed. We need to evacuate the horses. They ran outside to find the barn engulfed in flames, the animals screaming in terror. Ranch hands were already fighting the blaze, but it was spreading fast, too fast, fed by something more than accident. This was deliberate, Lucas said grimly, watching the flames. Same pattern as the Northern Valley attacks. A gunshot cracked through the chaos. Lucas threw Clara to the ground, covering her body with his as more shots rang out, coming from the tree line beyond the barn. Ambush, Lucas growled. They used the fire to draw us out. More shots. One of the ranch hands fell, clutching his leg. Lucas's men returned fire, and suddenly the night was war, bullets and flames and screaming horses. Clara crawled toward the wounded ranch hand, keeping low. She tore strips from her nightgown to bind his wound while bullets whistled overhead. Mrs. Blackstone, get back! Lucas shouted. He's bleeding out. Clara tied off the bandage, then looked toward the tree line where muzzle flashes marked their attackers. Lucas, there are only 3 or 4 of them. If we can flank them... No. Lucas was beside her in an instant. You're not fighting. You're getting to the house where it's safe. The house is wooden. If they torch it like the barn... Another volley of gunfire cut her off. Lucas pulled her toward the house anyway, signaling his men to cover them. They made it to the porch just as a bottle with a burning rag sailed through the air, smashing against the house's side. Fire bloomed instantly. They're trying to burn us out, Lucas said, his voice deadly calm. Force us into the open where they can pick us off. He looked at Clara, and she saw something fierce and protective in his eyes. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Always. Then go to my study. There's a rifle behind the desk and a strongbox in the floor under the rug. Take whatever money you can carry and the deed to the ranch. If this goes wrong... Don't! Clara grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. We survive this together or not at all. That's the deal. But Lucas kissed her hard, desperately. I love you. I love you too. Clara pulled back. So let's not die tonight. They split up. Lucas coordinating his men in fighting the fires and returning fire. Clara gathering weapons and critical documents. Through the study window, she saw more men emerging from the darkness. At least a dozen now, all armed. This wasn't Theodore acting alone. This was organized, funded, military precise. Clara grabbed the rifle, checked the ammunition, and moved to the window. She'd never shot at a person before, but she'd also never walked 17 miles through a blizzard, or married a stranger, or trapped arsonists. Fear was just another obstacle to survive. She took aim at a man trying to flank Lucas's position and fired. The recoil slammed her shoulder, but her shot found its mark. Not killing, but wounding, sending the man scrambling for cover. Lucas appeared beside her, his expression shocked and impressed. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah's been teaching me. Clara reloaded. She said a rancher's wife should know how to defend her home. Remind me to give Sarah a raise. Lucas took position at the other window. If we can hold them until dawn, the sheriff will see the smoke and send help. That's 3 hours away. Then we hold for 3 hours. They fought side by side, Clara and Lucas and the ranch hands defending their home with everything they had. The attackers kept coming, relentless and organized, but they hadn't counted on Clara's marksmanship or Lucas's tactical brilliance or the sheer stubborn refusal of everyone inside to surrender. An hour passed. Then 2. The fires were mostly contained, the ammunition running low, and Clara's shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. She was reloading when she saw a familiar figure emerge from the tree line. Theodore Hartwell himself, his face twisted with rage and madness. "Blackstone!" he screamed. "You destroyed everything. My reputation, my family, my future, all for some gutter whore you don't even love. Lucas's hand tightened on his rifle, but Clara stopped him. Let me, she said quietly. She stepped onto the porch, rifle lowered but ready, and faced Theodore across the burning yard. I'm sorry you're hurting, she called out. But Lucas didn't destroy you, Theodore. You destroyed yourself. Shut up. Theodore raised his pistol. You don't get to speak to me. You're nothing, a nobody who got lucky. You're right, Clara said calmly. I am nobody. I was a seamstress desperate for work. But Lucas saw something in me worth saving, and I saw something in him worth loving. That's not fraud, Theodore. That's just life. It's a lie! Spittle flew from Theodore's mouth. Everything about you is a lie. Then prove it. Clara spread her arms. Shoot me. Kill me. See if that brings back your reputation, or fixes your family, or changes anything. Theodore's hand shook, the pistol wavering. Or, Clara continued quietly, you can put down the gun and walk away. Face the charges for the arson. Take responsibility for your choices instead of blaming everyone else. For a moment, Theodore looked lost, a child caught in consequences he couldn't understand. Then his expression hardened, and Clara saw the decision in his eyes, a heartbeat before he pulled the trigger. She dove sideways as the shot cracked. Lucas's rifle boomed in response. Theodore fell, clutching his shoulder, his pistol spinning away into the dirt. Lucas's men rushed forward, securing Theodore and the remaining attackers. In the distance, Clara heard horses, the sheriff and deputies, finally arriving. Lucas pulled Clara into his arms, checking her frantically for injuries. You could have been killed! But I wasn't. Clara's hand shook now that the adrenaline was fading. Is it over? Is it really over? Yes. Lucas held her tighter. It's over. The sun rose over the Blackstone Ranch, painting the smoke-stained sky in shades of gold and crimson. The barn was destroyed, the house damaged but standing, and 13 men sat bound and waiting for the sheriff to cart them away to face justice. Theodore Hartwell, wounded but alive, stared at Clara with something that might have been grudging respect. You should have been terrified, he said, as the deputies loaded him into a wagon. You were just a seamstress. I was never just anything, Clara replied. You just couldn't see it. The investigation that followed revealed everything. The Hartwell family's involvement in the railroad conspiracy, Theodore's organization of the attack, Richard Ashford's financial backing of the legal assault on Lucas's marriage. Within a month, the Hartwell patriarch was arrested, Ashford fled to San Francisco to avoid indictment, and the railroad company agreed to the rancher's terms to avoid further scandal. Clara and Lucas were vindicated completely. The territorial attorney issued a formal apology. Eleanor Graham hosted a dinner in their honor. Even Margaret Ashford sent a brief note. I was wrong about you both. I hope you'll be happy. But the real victory came on a quiet evening 2 months later, as Clara and Lucas stood watching the new barn being raised, a community effort, with ranchers from across the territory helping to rebuild what had been destroyed. We did this, Clara said softly. We actually did this. You did this. Lucas turned her to face him. You walked into my life and changed everything. Made me believe in something more than survival and strategy. You saved me first. No. His smile was gentle. We saved each other. Clara looked at the ring on her finger, his mother's ring, no longer feeling too heavy or too real, just right. Lucas, about our agreement, the 1-year contract. His expression shuddered. What about it? It expires in 3 weeks. Clara's heart hammered. And I was thinking we should probably renegotiate the terms. Renegotiate. His voice was carefully neutral. To what? Forever. Clara stepped closer, her hands finding his chest. I want to renegotiate to forever. No end date, no escape clauses. Just us, building this life together. Lucas's breath caught. You're sure? Because, Clara, you could leave. Take the money, start fresh anywhere. You've earned that freedom. I don't want freedom from you. Clara rose on her toes, her lips brushing his. I want freedom with you, to build something real, to love you without pretending, to be your wife, not because a judge said so, but because I choose it. Then choose it. Lucas pulled her close,
his voice rough with emotion. Choose me. Choose us. Choose this life we've built from lies and turned into truth. Do, Clara whispered. I choose you, every day, forever. Lucas kissed her as the sun set over the ranch they'd defended together, the community they'd built together, the future they'd fought for together. Around them, ranchers and ranch hands worked and laughed, rebuilding what had been destroyed, creating something stronger from the ashes. Sarah watched from the porch, smiling through tears, thinking of Lucas's mother and how proud she would have been of the man her son had become and the woman who'd helped him remember how to live. The lie that had begun in fire and desperation had been forged in battle and hardship into something unbreakable. Clara Whitmore, who'd walked 17 miles through a blizzard seeking work, had found something far more valuable: a home, a purpose, a love strong enough to rewrite both their futures. On a spring morning 6 months later, Clara and Lucas stood before the territorial courthouse with Judge Morrison, who'd officiated their first wedding. This time there was no rush, no secrecy, no forged documents. This time, Eleanor and Senator Graham stood as witnesses, along with Sarah and Patterson and dozens of ranchers who'd become family. We don't need to do this, Lucas had said when Clara suggested it. We're already married. I know, Clara had replied, but that marriage started as a lie. This one starts as truth. I want to marry you again, Lucas Blackstone, publicly, honestly, with everyone we love watching. So they did. Judge Morrison smiled as he began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something rather unusual. A couple renewing vows they've already taken, reaffirming a marriage that some questioned but none can doubt now. Clara wore cream silk, simpler than her first wedding dress, but infinitely more meaningful. Lucas wore the same dark suit he'd worn the night he'd claimed her at the Hartwell party, but his eyes held something they hadn't then: absolute certainty. Lucas Blackstone, Judge Morrison said, do you take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live? I do. Lucas's voice rang clear. I did before, and I'll do it again every day for the rest of my life. And Clara Whitmore Blackstone, do you take Lucas to be your lawfully wedded husband through all trials and triumphs, through all the days ahead? Clara looked at the man who'd saved her, challenged her, loved her past all reason and caution. She thought about the girl who'd walked through a blizzard and the woman she'd become. She thought about lies that became truth and truth that became legend. I do, she said clearly, forever. Then by the power vested in me, and with the blessing of this entire community, I pronounce you, again, husband and wife. Judge Morrison grinned. Lucas, you may kiss your bride. Again. Lucas pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her as the crowd erupted in cheers, as Sarah cried happy tears, as Eleanor Graham declared it the most romantic thing she'd ever witnessed. The celebration lasted until dawn. Ranchers danced with their wives, deals were struck over whiskey, and Clara found herself surrounded by women who'd once looked at her with suspicion, but now embraced her as one of their own. You've changed this territory, Eleanor said, pulling Clara aside as the party wound down. Not just by marrying Lucas, but by showing us all that strength comes in unexpected forms. The Ranchers Collective, the railroad negotiations, defending your home. You've proven that power isn't about birth or breeding, it's about courage. I was just surviving, Clara said. No, my dear, you were leading. There's a difference. Eleanor's smile was knowing. And this territory needs leaders like you, which is why I'm hoping you'll consider running for the Territorial Council next year. Clara's eyes widened. Me? I couldn't. You absolutely could, and you should. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Think about it. As the sun rose over the celebration, Clara and Lucas slipped away to their ranch, to the home they'd defended and rebuilt together. They stood on the porch where they'd first admitted their love, watching the mountains turn gold with morning light. Eleanor wants me to run for Territorial Council, Clara said. Lucas pulled her close. Will you? I don't know. Part of me thinks I'm not qualified, that I don't belong in politics. The same part that thought you didn't belong in society? Lucas's smile was gentle. Clara,
You've negotiated with ranchers, trapped criminals, defended our home with a rifle, and won the respect of everyone who matters. If that doesn't qualify you, nothing does. Clara leaned into his warmth, thinking. A year ago, she'd been nobody, a seamstress walking through a blizzard, desperate and alone. Now she stood on land she'd helped defend, beside a man she'd helped save, part of a community she'd helped build. The lie Lucas had told to protect her had become the truest thing in both their lives. Okay, she said finally. I'll run, but only if you're beside me. Always. Lucas kissed her temple. That's what we do. We face everything together. They stood wrapped in each other's arms as the new day began, the future stretching ahead like untouched snow, daunting and beautiful and theirs to shape. Clara Blackstone, born Clara Whitmore in poverty and desperation, had walked 17 miles through a blizzard seeking work. Instead, she'd found a war, a husband, a purpose, and a love strong enough to rewrite the rules of an entire territory. What began as a lie born in fire had become a legacy forged in truth, and they had forever to see just how far it could go.